The street was quiet in the way only dusk could make it, half awake, half asleep. Amber streetlights flickered on one by one as the elderly black man moved slowly down the sidewalk, his cane tapping softly against the pavement. Each step carried the weight of years. Years of work, loss, resilience, and survival. The city rushed past him every day, yet tonight it seemed to pause, watching. His coat hung loosely on his thin frame, and his shoulders bent slightly forward, not from weakness, but from time. Still, there was dignity in the way he walked, measured, unhurried, unafraid. He had learned long ago that fear only steals what little peace the world allows. Memories followed him like shadows. A life once loud with laughter, a home once full. Now, there was silence, but not emptiness. He found comfort in routine, in the familiar path home, in the soft glow of streetlights that reminded him he wasn't invisible, not completely. A cold breeze brushed his face, and he paused, resting both hands on the handle of his cane. For a moment, he looked up at the sky, painted in fading blues and purples, and smiled faintly. He had survived storms far worse than this quiet evening. Somewhere in the distance, engines roared, laughter echoed, and the city reminded him it could still be cruel. But he kept walking, because strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers with every step forward. And as the streetlights glowed warmer, casting long shadows behind him, the old man continued on, proof that even in the quietest moments, courage endures. The camera would have lingered on his face if anyone had been watching. Deep lines traced his skin like a map of everywhere he had been and everything he had survived. Each wrinkle told a story, of long days under burning suns, of nights spent worrying about bills, family, and a future that never came easy. Yet his eyes remained steady, wise, calm. They held the quiet strength of a man who had learned when to fight and when to endure. There was a subtle concern in his expression, barely noticeable unless you looked closely. Not fear. He had outlived fear, but awareness. Life had taught him that danger rarely announced itself. It arrived softly, often disguised as confidence or cruelty wearing a smile. He read the world the way sailors read the sea, always watching for small signs that others ignored. The shallow depth of the moment blurred the city behind him. Noise faded. Faces passed without meaning. What remained was memory. He remembered a time when his reflection looked different, when his back was straighter and his steps quicker. He remembered holding his children's hands, promising protection even when he had none to give. He remembered standing tall when the world tried to make him smaller. His gaze shifted slightly, catching movement at the edge of the street. A group too loud for the hour, too careless. His jaw tightened just a little. He had learned not to assume kindness, but he had also learned not to surrender dignity. He inhaled slowly, grounding himself. Calm was his armor now, patience his shield. Whatever came next, he would face it standing, because that was what life had trained him to do. In that close-up moment, with the world blurred and his eyes in focus, one truth became clear. This was not the face of a weak man. It was the face of survival. The German shepherd moved beside the old man with quiet precision, every step measured, every sound cataloged. His broad shoulders rolled smoothly beneath a thick coat, muscles shaped not by play, but by years of purpose. Though no badge hung from his collar now, discipline clung to him like a second skin. He did not wander. He did not pull. He stayed close, exactly where he was meant to be. His eyes were sharp, scanning the street with calm intelligence. Reflections of passing lights flickered across them, but nothing escaped his attention. A sudden laugh in the distance, the rev of an engine, the shift of footsteps behind them. Each detail was noted, filed away, assessed. This was not nervousness. It was readiness. The old man walked slowly, his cane tapping a steady rhythm, and the dog matched it perfectly. He adjusted his pace without command, slowing when the man slowed, stopping when he stopped. Years ago, he had learned to protect without aggression, to stand between danger and the one entrusted to him. That lesson had never faded. People who passed saw only a big dog. Some crossed the street. Others stared. None of them knew the history carried in that powerful frame. The long nights, the tense standoffs, the silent victories where lives were saved without applause. Retirement had taken him from duty, not from responsibility. As they moved beneath the warm streetlights, the shepherd briefly looked up at the man. The old man nodded, almost imperceptibly. No words were needed. They were bound by trust forged in time. Side by side, they continued down the street. One weathered by years, the other sharpened by training, together forming a quiet force that the night would soon learn not to underestimate. They gathered beneath a flickering streetlight, like a storm waiting to break. The bikers leaned against their motorcycles, engines still warm, metal ticking softly as it cooled. Leather jackets creaked when they moved, stitched with patches that told stories of territory, ego, and violence. Tattoos crawled up their arms and necks, inked warnings meant to intimidate before a single word was spoken. Laughter cut through the night, loud and careless, echoing off brick walls and closed storefronts. It wasn't joy. It was the kind of sound made by men who fed on attention and fear. One biker spat onto the pavement. Another cracked his knuckles, eyes scanning the street as if searching for something or someone weak enough to entertain them. Their motorcycles stood in a loose formation, chrome glinting under neon lights, beasts waiting to be unleashed. Every rev of an engine was a challenge, a reminder of power and speed. The city had learned to step aside when they arrived. Most nights, people did. A passing couple crossed the street without a word. A shop owner pulled down his shutter a little faster than necessary. The bikers noticed. They always did. Fear was currency to them. Then one of them looked up the street and smirked. "Looks like we got company," he muttered, nodding toward the shadows. The group followed his gaze, eyes narrowing, interest sparking. The night seemed to hold its breath. They didn't yet understand that not every quiet figure was defenseless, and not every shadow hid prey. Some had consequences. The engines roared to life all at once, shaking the ground like distant thunder. From the street level, the bikers loomed large, towering over the night as their motorcycles snarled beneath them. Headlights flared on, bright and blinding, cutting through the darkness like searching eyes. The glare washed the street in harsh white beams, erasing detail, leaving only silhouettes and threat. Smoke curled upward from the exhausts, slow and deliberate, drifting through the air like a warning. It clung to the streetlights, blurring their glow and turning the night hazy, unreal. The smell of fuel mixed with asphalt, sharp and heavy. This was their stage, and they knew it. One biker twisted his throttle again, the sound rising in pitch, aggressive and mocking. Laughter followed, low, rough, and full of challenge. Boots slammed onto the pavement as they dismounted, their shadows stretching long and distorted across the ground. The city felt smaller from this angle, pressed down by noise and intimidation. Windows above stayed dark. Curtains remained closed. People had learned when not to look. The bikers fed on the tension, on the silence that followed each rev. Power didn't always need action. Sometimes it only needed to be displayed. They believed the street belonged to them in that moment. But beneath the roar and the smoke, something else stirred. Not fear, focus. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that waits. As the engines idled, vibrating with restrained force, the night held its breath, unaware that this show of dominance was about to meet something far more controlled and far more dangerous. The old man stopped. The sound of his cane against the pavement faded as the bikers rolled forward, their motorcycles spreading out until the street was no longer a path but a wall. Headlights burned into the night, casting long, distorted shadows that swallowed his thin frame. In the wide darkness, he looked small, one man against many, age and silence facing noise and steel. For a moment, no one spoke. The engines idled, growling low, like animals testing their prey. Leather creaked as riders shifted their weight, boots scraping against asphalt. The power imbalance was obvious, deliberate. This was how they liked it. The old man stood still, shoulders squared despite the years pressing on them. His grip tightened slightly around the cane, not in panic but in preparation. He had been blocked before in life, by doors that refused to open, by people who decided his limits for him. He had learned that stopping did not mean surrender. One biker leaned forward, helmet tilted, studying him. Another laughed softly, the sound echoing in the hollow street. The city itself seemed to retreat, pulling back into shadows, unwilling to witness what might follow. Yet the old man did not lower his eyes. His face remained calm, unreadable. In the darkness, that calm felt out of place and dangerous. He took a slow breath, steadying himself, as if measuring the moment rather than fearing it. What the bikers saw was an easy target, framed by night and age. What they failed to see was the weight of experience standing quietly in front of them, and the quiet presence beside him, already alert. The streetlights flickered overhead, and the balance of power began to shift, unnoticed, in the dark. The biker's lips curled into a slow, arrogant smirk as he leaned forward, helmet dangling loosely from one hand. From his angle, the old man looked small, fragile, an inconvenience at best. The streetlight above flickered, carving harsh shadows across the biker's face, sharpening the lines of his grin and hollowing his eyes. Confidence radiated from him, thick and careless. He had worn that look before. It was the look of someone who believed the night belonged to him. Leather stretched across his broad shoulders as he shifted his weight, boots planted wide in a stance meant to dominate. The low rumble of engines behind him was reassurance, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Strength in numbers, fear in others. He glanced down at the cane first, then at the old man's bowed frame, and let out a short laugh through his nose. In his world, weakness was obvious. Age was a flaw. Silence was submission. That was the story he told himself. But the old man didn't flinch. His eyes remained steady, reflecting the biker's smirk without absorbing it. That lack of reaction caused the biker's grin to tighten just a fraction. He wasn't used to being ignored. The shadows deepened as clouds drifted over the moon, plunging the street into a grittier darkness. In that moment, the biker failed to notice the shift in the air, the quiet tension tightening like a drawn wire. He didn't see the alert presence at the old man's side. He didn't recognize discipline when it stood inches away. Arrogance has a way of narrowing vision. As the biker straightened, still smiling, he had no idea that this close-up moment, this look of superiority, would be the last time he felt in control that night. The dog moved first, quietly, deliberately, almost imperceptibly. One step forward placed his body slightly ahead of the old man, just enough to form a barrier. His ears lifted, sharp and alert, catching every sound. The growl of engines, the scrape of boots, the change in breathing. Muscles tightened beneath his thick coat, coiled and ready, but restrained by discipline rather than impulse. Time seemed to slow. The world narrowed to small details. The flicker of streetlight across his fur, the faint tremor in the ground, the scent of tension in the air. His eyes locked onto the nearest biker, calm yet unyielding. This was not a threat born of anger. It was protection born of training. The old man felt the shift beside him and did not look down. He trusted the dog completely. He always had. There was comfort in that silent presence, in a knowledge that he was no longer standing alone. The bikers noticed the movement a second too late. What they saw was not just a dog, but a posture that spoke volumes. The squared shoulders, the perfectly balanced stance, the stillness that warned of sudden precision. Some instincts are universal, and even the most reckless recognize danger when it stands firm and unafraid. No growl broke the silence. None was needed. The dog's breathing remained steady, controlled, his focus unwavering. Years ago, he had learned when to act and when to wait. Tonight, waiting was enough. In that stretched-out moment, with tension hanging thick in the air, the balance of power shifted, not with noise or force, but with quiet, disciplined resolve. Years ago, the dog had walked a very different street. Gone were the quiet sidewalks and dim streetlights. In their place were flashing patrol lights, the hum of radios, and streets alive with danger. He had stood tall beside uniformed officers, his coat gleaming under the harsh glow of stadium bright lights, a badge fastened proudly across his harness, a symbol not just of authority, but of trust earned through years of service. Every step had been deliberate, every movement precise. He had learned to read the chaos of the world in ways humans sometimes could not, a twitch of a hand, the scent of fear, the hesitation in a fugitive step. He had leapt into action when ordered, neutralizing threats with trained restraint, saving lives without hesitation, yet always returning to his handler's side, as if to say, "We're in this together." Officers respected him, not as a pet, but as a partner. Together they patrolled neighborhoods, streets, and alleys that few dared to enter alone. He had faced darkness head-on, guided by duty, loyalty, and a sense of justice older than the humans around him. Now, in the present, when the old man leaned on his cane and the bikers blocked the street, that same instinct flickered in his eyes. Years of service hadn't left him. The streets of today were quieter, but danger still lingered. And just like then, he would not hesitate to protect those he had sworn to safeguard. Even if the badge was gone, the courage remained. In that flashback, the dog's past whispered a warning. Experience is invisible until it strikes. The world had been chaos, flashing lights, shouted commands, and the acrid sting of smoke, but he moved through it with precision. The dog launched himself forward, muscles coiled like springs, every step calculated, every leap purposeful. Motion blurred around him, but his focus remained razor-sharp, target acquired, mission clear. Years of training condensed into a single, perfect instant. He remembered the moment clearly, even now. The suspect had bolted, desperate, reckless. Officers shouted, their voices almost drowned by the roar of the city and the pounding of adrenaline. But he didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, he closed the distance, pause striking with controlled force, jaws ready but restrained, trained to subdue without unnecessary harm. Every officer on the scene trusted him implicitly. He had earned that trust through countless hours of discipline, endurance, and silent obedience. He moved not as a pet, not as a companion, but as a partner in the dangerous ballet of law enforcement. One misstep could cost lives. Precision was not optional. It was survival. Even in midair, time slowed for him. He registered every movement, every shift in weight, every flicker of the suspect's gaze. When he landed perfectly, blocking escape, asserting control, ensuring no harm came to anyone but the threat itself. That same dog, years later, now walked quietly beside an elderly man, a shadow of calm in a darkened street. But in his eyes burned the memory of every operation, every leap, every act of protection. The bikers didn't yet know the danger standing before them, but he never forgot how to act. Experience isn't taught. It's earned in moments that move faster than most can see. The growl was low and controlled, barely louder than the hum of the engines, but it cut through the night like a warning bell. The dog stood perfectly still, eyes locked on the bikers, pupils narrowed with intense focus. Every strand of fur along his neck and spine seemed alive, bristling with restrained power, catching the streetlight in sharp, ultra-detailed definition. This was not rage. It was calculation. His breathing slowed, measured and deliberate, the way it had been trained years ago. He tracked every movement, the twitch of a hand, the shift of a boot, the slight hesitation in a biker's stance. He did not need a lunge. Not yet. His presence alone spoke volumes. The old man felt the vibration of that quiet growl through the leash, and it steadied him. He remained calm, trusting the intelligence beside him. They had faced enough in life to recognize when silence was stronger than noise. One of the bikers laughed nervously, trying to mask discomfort. Another took an unconscious step back. Instincts whispered what pride refused to admit. This was no ordinary dog. There was something unsettling in the stillness, in the way those eyes never blinked, never wavered. Streetlight glinted off the dog's fur as the wind shifted, revealing scars beneath the coat, faint, earned marks of service. Each one told a story of control under pressure. The growl stopped, replaced by absolute silence. That was worse, because in that moment, everyone understood. If the line was crossed, there would be no chaos, only precision. And the dog was already ready. The movement was instant, clean, precise, unstoppable. 1 second the dog was still, a coiled shadow at the old man's side. The next, he lunged forward into a perfect control stance, paws striking the pavement with trained accuracy. There was no wild aggression, no chaos, only discipline unleashed. Years of police training took over, every motion sharp and intentional. The bikers froze. Eyes widened. Smirks vanished. The sudden shift shattered their confidence like glass. The dog's body formed a powerful barrier, angled just right, muscles locked, head low, eyes burning with command. He didn't attack. He didn't need to. His stance alone spoke a language older than fear. This ends now. One biker stumbled back, nearly losing his balance. Another raised his hands instinctively, heart pounding, breath caught in his throat. They had expected noise, threats, weakness. What they faced instead was control, the kind that comes from experience, not ego. The old man stood firm behind the dog, his presence steady, unshaken. He had seen this before, though not in years. The calm before action. The moment when danger realized it had misjudged everything. Streetlights flickered overhead, illuminating the dog's form like a statue carved from purpose. Even the engines seemed quieter now, their roar reduced to background hum. The bikers exchanged glances, uncertainty rippling through the group. The balance of power had shifted, unmistakably and irreversibly. In that single, disciplined movement, the dog reminded them of a truth they had forgotten. Real strength doesn't threaten. It acts. The camera drops low, locking onto the heavy boot as it scrapes forward across the pavement. Leather creaks. The biker steps closer, slow and deliberate, his shadow stretching until it nearly swallows the dog's paws. From this angle, the threat feels enormous. Steel toe inches away, dust shifting under its weight. The sound of the engines fades, replaced by the amplified thud of a single step. The biker doesn't see the warning signs. He doesn't notice how the dog's stance tightens, how muscles harden beneath thick fur, how balance shifts perfectly into place. To him, it's just a dog. Just another obstacle meant to be intimidated. The camera cuts to the dog's eyes, unblinking, locked, calculating. Years of training ignite in silence. No bark, no sudden movement, only control. The old man's grip tightens on the cane, not in fear, but in anticipation. He knows this moment matters. One more step, one wrong move, and everything changes. The biker's boot inches forward again, toe almost brushing the dog's space. The sound echoes unnaturally loud. The tension becomes unbearable, stretching the moment thin. Even the streetlights seem to hold their breath. Then, stillness. The dog exhales slowly, chest rising and falling with disciplined restraint. He is waiting, not reacting but deciding. This is the line. The biker smirks above the frame, unaware that his next move will no longer be his choice. The shot holds on the boot, frozen at the edge of consequence, because sometimes danger doesn't roar. Sometimes it steps forward. Panic hit them all at once. Boots scraped against asphalt as the bikers stumbled backward, confidence collapsing into chaos. One man tripped over his own heel, crashing into a motorcycle and sending it tilting dangerously before he caught it at the last second. Another swung around too fast, knocking into a handlebar, curses spilling from his mouth as control slipped away. The street that had belonged to them moments ago suddenly felt hostile. Engines revved in confusion, not dominance. Headlights jittered as bikes shifted, beams cutting wild patterns across brick walls and startled faces. The once tight formation unraveled into disorder, each biker reacting on instinct, fear louder than pride. Their eyes kept darting back to the dog, still focused, unmoving. That was the worst part. He didn't chase. He didn't bark. He simply held his ground, a living line they didn't dare cross. The old man stood behind him, framed by the light, calm as stone. Metal clattered. A motorcycle leaned too far and slammed onto its side with a heavy crash, sparks skittering across the pavement. The sound echoed like a gunshot, sealing their panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Shouts overlapped. Someone yelled to back up. Another screamed to start the engines. The street filled with frantic motion, a stark contrast to the controlled stillness at the center of it all. In seconds, the hunters became the hunted, trapped not by force, but by the sudden realization that they were outmatched. And in the middle of the chaos, the dog never moved. The camera slowly rises to frame the elderly man at the center of the chaos. Where moments ago he seemed small, he now stands firmly planted, shoulders squared, posture steady. The noise fades just enough for his presence to take over. He raises one hand slightly, not in surrender, not in threat, but in command. The gesture is simple, controlled, undeniable. The bikers hesitate. From this angle, his calm feels powerful. His face is unreadable, weathered by years, yet unbroken. He does not shout. He does not rush. His silence carries more authority than their engines ever did. The streetlight above casts a warm glow around him, separating him from the frantic movement behind the bikes. The dog remains at his side, alert but obedient, responding instantly to that raised hand. This is not chaos. This is control. The old man and the dog move as one, an unspoken bond forged through trust and experience. A biker swallows hard. Another takes a step back without realizing it. The balance of power is now unmistakable. What they thought was weakness has revealed itself as discipline, patience, and command. The camera cuts to close-ups, trembling hands, darting eyes, engines idling uncertainly. Then back to the old man, still and dignified. He lowers his hands slowly, signaling the end without a word. The message is clear: walk away. As the bikers retreat, the old man remains where he is, unshaken. Strength, the shot reminds us, doesn't need volume. Sometimes it only needs presence. The camera cuts low and tight, framing the dog as he stands guard in front of the man. Street lights flare behind him, turning his broad form into a powerful silhouette etched in gold and shadow. His stance is solid, immovable, paws planted wide, chest forward, head held high. In this moment, he doesn't look like a companion. He looks like a sentinel. The city noise fades into a distant hum. What remains is the steady rhythm of his breathing and the faint jingle of his collar. Light traces the edges of his fur, highlighting every line of strength earned through years of discipline. His ears stay forward, tracking movement, ready but controlled. Behind him, the old man is partially obscured, protected by that living wall. A hand rests calmly on the cane. He doesn't need to speak. He trusts what stands between him and danger. The bikers hesitate at the edge of the frame. Their shapes are smaller now, uncertain, fractured by the glare of headlights and fear. No one steps forward. No one dares. The dog's silhouette holds them back more effectively than any weapon. The camera slowly circles, emphasizing the heroic framing. The dog against the light, unyielding, resolute. This is not aggression. This is guardianship. As the engines begin to fade and the tension drains from the street, the dog never breaks posture. Because heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they stand in the light so others don't have to. The first hint of red and blue appeared at the far end of the street, faint at first like a heartbeat in the distance. Then the colors grew stronger, washing over brick walls, parked cars, and the uneasy faces of the bikers. The glow pulsed rhythmically, steady and inevitable. With it came relief, not loud, not sudden, but unmistakable. The sirens themselves were still far off, muted by buildings and night air, yet their presence was undeniable. Authority was approaching. Consequences were no longer abstract. The tension that had knotted the street began to loosen, breath by breath. The bikers shifted uneasily. Engines idled lower. Voices dropped. The bravado that had fueled them moments earlier drained away under the red and blue light. Fear gave way to calculation. How to leave without making things worse. The dog remained in position, eyes forward, posture unchanged. He didn't need to act now. The job was nearly done. Years of service echoed in his stillness, in the way he understood that sometimes justice arrived on its own schedule. The elderly man exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing for the first time. The glow reflected in his eyes, softening the hard edges of the night. He hadn't asked for help, but he welcomed its arrival. As the lights grew brighter, the street felt different, safer, calmer, reclaimed. Shadows retreated. Noise faded. The night hadn't ended in violence. It ended in balance restored. And under the steady wash of red and blue, peace finally found its way back. The escape was sudden and desperate. Engines screamed as the bikers scrambled back onto their motorcycles, fear replacing swagger in a heartbeat. Tires spun against the pavement, kicking up grit and smoke as they tore away from the curb. The camera struggles to keep up, motion blur streaking the night into lines of neon and shadow. Streetlights smear into glowing trails as the riders surge forward, no longer hunting, only fleeing. One bike lurches forward too fast, nearly clipping a parked car before swerving hard. Another rider glances back over his shoulder, eyes wide, breath ragged, as if expecting pursuit. There is none. That makes it worse. Silence chases them harder than any threat. The city becomes a tunnel of darkness and light. Alleys flashing past, storefronts closing their eyes, windows reflecting panic-stricken faces. The sound of sirens grows louder behind them. Not urgent, just present. Inevitable. Leather jackets snap in the wind as they push their machines to the limit, fear driving their speed. What began as a show of dominance ends as a retreat fueled by instinct alone. No words are exchanged now. Pride has no place in survival. In the distance, the street they left behind shrinks into darkness. The place where they lost control, where something silent stood its ground. The night swallows them one by one, engines fading into echoes. And as the city settles back into quiet, the truth follows them down every road. They didn't escape power. They ran from it. The chaos had passed, leaving behind an almost tangible stillness. The street was quiet now, lit by the soft glow of warm streetlights that reflected off the wet asphalt. The engines, the shouts, the fear, it was all gone, replaced by a calm that felt almost surreal. The elderly man knelt slightly, resting a gnarled, weathered hand on the dog's head. The dog leaned into the touch, ears flicking in contentment, eyes softening after the tension of the night. There was no need for words. Gratitude flowed silently from man to dog, and trust flowed back just as naturally. Years of shared life, discipline, and loyalty were summed up in this single gesture. The man's voice was barely a whisper, more to himself than anyone else. Good boy. It was not praise. It was acknowledgement of courage, of protection, of a bond forged in quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. The dog remained still, alert enough to respond if danger returned, but finally able to relax. The warm lighting painted long, soft shadows across the street, highlighting the two figures in a cinematic frame, age and experience beside power and discipline, forming a silent harmony that no chaos could break. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Even the city seemed to pause, acknowledging that here, in this simple, human moment, the storm had passed. No one had to speak to understand what had happened. In that peaceful pause, the man and his guardian stood together, proof that true strength is measured not in fear or intimidation, but in loyalty, trust, and the quiet courage to protect those who matter most. The street was quiet now, the chaos long gone, leaving only the soft hum of the city at night. Beneath a single streetlight, the elderly man stood tall, though age had bent his shoulders only slightly. Beside him, the dog, retired but far from forgotten, sat with unwavering pride, silhouette sharp against the warm glow. Every muscle relaxed, every sense alert. The animal radiated the calm authority of years spent in service. The camera would linger on them, capturing a moment that felt larger than the street itself. The man's hand rested lightly on the dog's head, a gesture of trust and gratitude, but also recognition. This wasn't just a companion. This was a hero, a guardian whose loyalty and courage had turned the tide of the night. The city around them seemed to hold its breath. The motorcycles, now distant, were nothing more than fading echoes. Even the shadows seemed to bow slightly, acknowledging the quiet power that had held the night in balance. The dog's eyes glinted in the light, intelligent and watchful, a reminder that true courage often moves in silence. The elderly man's face reflected relief and pride, not only for himself, but for the steadfast friend who had protected him without question. In that frame, under the streetlight, they were more than man and dog. They were resilience made tangible, courage made visible, and trust made eternal. The scene didn't need words. It told a story of loyalty, honor, and the kind of heroism that never seeks attention, yet commands it all the same. The night belonged to them,